now featuring Cyberport Technologies CEO Kevin Powderly and Gary Chella. Tim is hardwired from the West Coast and joining us from Connolly. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
What an interesting week we have had, and I know that you've been just chock full of business opportunities, making things happen, as well as observing how the rest of the marketplace has been behaving.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We have this huge new news that always affects how we do the show, in that we've got Goldman Sachs settling with the SEC for essentially a slap on the wrist. 14 days of their profits, they settled this supposedly huge case the SEC had. And then, of course, the very same day, FINREG passes the Senate. And there are many, many people that feel that FINREG would never have gotten through the Senate if the SEC hadn't filed the case against Goldman Sachs.
There's a certain perverse kind of irony in all that, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously, I've got my feelings about the politics of all of that, but there are lots of changes coming. And, of course, the good news. BP has stopped the flow of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. That's great news for us.
The headline in the Houston paper this morning is huge. 85 days, 16 hours, and 25 minutes later. And, oh, by the way, an estimated 94 to 184 million gallons. And then the big headline, BP stops oil flow, with a big, giant asterisk at the end. And below that, next to the asterisk, it says, for now.
And, what's so tragic, I flew back from Florida on Wednesday.
Yes.
And went directly over the Macondo and saw the magnitude of the spill is just beyond what anyone has seen on television. It's something that I guess they just don't want to show because it would depress everyone. But they're working on it. There are many, many things happening to improve this situation, and at least the flow of oil is stopping now. Now, the big risk that's coming up this week, and in fact, we'll be talking about this later. It may be a great time to short BP stock. They are now within 6 feet of the relief well penetrating the Macondo. And people don't understand, this is a very dangerous operation, because if they don't hit the pipe directly head on, they could fracture the well and it starts leaking everywhere.
Yeah, they actually stopped the drilling last night or yesterday afternoon because they were so close to the original shaft, and they didn't want to, mess up anything while they were trying to put this new cap in place. So it's a very, very delicate operation. I'm wondering what this does for the stocks of oil well servicing companies like Bolton Foods, for example, which is in charge of drilling this relief well, or at least the engineering thereof. This has got to be just a boom for companies in that kind of business.
Well, it's been a boon for many, many companies that are involved in the remediation, but unfortunately it's also resulted in a loss of somewhere in the range of 50,000 jobs. The latest data we have, the Financial Times did an analysis this week, for every one of the deep water drilling rigs that are leaving, and 2 have announced this week they're leaving, there's a loss of approximately 1,400 jobs attached to that rig. So there's serious economic ramifications here that this needs to get addressed very quickly. And interestingly enough, Bob Graham, who's considered to be a very liberal member of the commission that's looking at the reasoning of the moratorium, actually came out this week and said he wants to see a way that they cut the moratorium and get drilling in the Gulf going again. That's an encouraging sign.
There was a poll out last night, and forgive me for not knowing the source right off the top of my head, but 70% of those polled are against the moratorium. 70% of the American public understands that it's an economic disaster to do this kind of a moratorium right now. And what is the definition of insanity when you try to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result? And the Interior Department continues to try to file these moratoriums and block this stuff.
Well, it would be interesting to hear from our friends in hedge fund land in Greenwich, Connecticut. We have Gary Chella, who is our resident expert up there and always has his finger on the pulse of things. Gary, what's the talk up there right now about BP?
Well, before we get to that, I don't know, fellas, let me ask you something, because I must be missing the boat here, or perhaps Joe Biden is not on planet Earth. A few days ago, the administration came out and said, with much enthusiasm, our $862 billion stimulus saved about 3 million jobs. I ran the numbers. That comes out to about $260,000 per job.
I'd like one of those jobs.
I'm assuming they must be jobs working for the government, because I don't know very many private sector jobs that start a salary or have an average salary of that amount. I don't even know where to begin with what this administration does as far as, ceasing the drilling, losing 1,400 jobs per rig lost. I mean, what planet are these people on? If you want to save jobs, cut taxes. You can't take money from someone else and give it to somebody else and say we saved the job. Okay, now that I feel better,
I got to ask you a question about that calculation, though, Gary, because when you did the calculation on that,
the general feeling from a number of hedge funds, including some that were actively buying, and God bless them, they were spot on at $28 and $29 a share on BP. They felt that once this gets capped, there'll be a bounce, and that's what we're seeing. But as soon as they make their profit, they're gone, because their lawsuits are going to be coming. The cleanup is going to take years and years. There's going to be somebody in Alaska that's going to say that their cancer was caused by a flyover of, the Gulf. And so these lawsuits are never going to stop. And I think what you were saying is spot on before, Tim. It might be a time now to short BP. And I know people that are doing just that.
Brent, what were you about to comment on? So I know you had something to say there.
Well, we've gone past that point. Maybe we can bring it back up after the break, because it's a completely different, we're on a different subject right now. This whole thing about doing stuff, the government imposing rules that essentially harms any kind of economic recovery that we're trying to nurture along, it just boggles the mind.
Well, and when we started this week, and in fact one of our guests will be talking about this directly, was this whole issue of the anti-business. Certainly we call it, we don't feel it, it's not perception, it's real. The administration says we're not anti-business, and yet we've seen a tremendous number of regulations that damage business come down the line, including those in FinReg, including those in the new health care bill, including new regulations about unionization of businesses. So there's a lot of stuff out there, Brent, that we don't know about yet, that we keep finding out every day.
And we'll talk more about that when we return with Gary Chilla. Also, CyberCore Technology CEO Kevin Powderly. Tim Connolly, hardwired from the West Coast. I'm Brent Clanton. It's 16 past the hour. The following announcement.
Don't miss a moment of great CRN programming. Log on to CRNtalk.com to get the latest scoop. Listen live, download past shows. Even find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Ustream. CRNtalk.com keeps you connected to quality talk radio, like Dennis Prager, Tom Hartman, Barry Farber, Doug Steffen, Man Cow, Michael Savage,